Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Newsflash. We have some great news stories for you to enjoy today, but it's made all that much better because we have a special guest. It's Splinter's Libby Watson with us. Libby, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Of course.
All right, so we got to get right into it with the big news everyone's talking about. Donald Trump, in the fallout that he has had after the weird press conference with Putin, where he pretty much said that the U.S. is not to blame, the U.S. is to blame, and the U.S. has been foolish, but not Russia. Russia has been good, and every single journalist was kind of flipped out after that. Then the next day he comes out, says in the White House that, no, I was just talking in a double negative by accident, and I misspoke or something strange and odd like that. But I just want to start. It feels like every time you talk to a Democrat, you do have to kind of ask them, and a Democrat of really any shade, what's your position, Libby, on the broader Russia probe?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good thing to be happening. It clearly. I mean, it seems pretty obvious that there is something shady going on there, stretching back years. I don't know if I buy the Jonathan Chait hypothesis that Donald Trump has been a Russian asset for years now. I think that's unlikely. But, I do think it's all worth investigating. I don't think that it's going to be some kind of silver bullet that will take down Trump. And I think it's pretty likely that all of this ends in a few pardons that he will legally and easily give out to whoever it is in his circle that goes down. I mean, it would be so great to see, Donald Jr. or Jared Kushner or something get the perp walk and go to jail. But I just... Maybe it's just my lack of faith in institutions these days, but I don't see it happening. America is very good at over-punishing small infractions that poor people and black teenagers do, and it's very bad at punishing any kind of rich or white-collar crime, including possible collusion with Russia. So, I mean, that's my take. It's like, it's a good thing to be happening, but it's not something we should really focus on so much, I don't think.
Yeah, I definitely, you just look at the last decade or so on Wall Street, and then you get kind of the example of the sense of what could happen to these rich and powerful friends and associates of the president. But I think it's definitely, I mean, I don't know. Do you think it's kind of more of a distraction, a kind of a meat shield for Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to make an issue so they don't have to focus on things that are a little bit more touchy with them, like Medicare for All, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think, I'm not sure who's telling them really that it's like a political win for them because, I think liberals do care, but I don't know whether they care about Russia as much as they care about where their next paycheck is coming from and whether they'll have healthcare and the tax bill and just the myriad other huge policy failures that the Trump administration has had. There's a very specific class of MSNBC liberals who really, really care about this stuff. But in terms of what motivates people to vote or whatever, I don't really know that it's that that it's a sensible thing to focus on. Having said that, I'm pleased to see that not that many Democrats are running on Russia as an issue, so that's good. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right that this kind of in a broader sense, the Trump collusion / high crimes and misdemeanors sort of let's impeach Trump thing is a sort of it's a convenient distraction for those who would resist the changes in the Democratic Party that I think those on the left agree are necessary. It's very easy to be this is not normal, and we need to get back to normal politics and return to when things were good, and obviously people on the left will say, newsflash, things were never good. Yeah. And there's a lot more work to be done that isn't to do with Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think in the end, impeachment is. I mean, while we have a sure fight Donald Trump hard as possible when he comes up for election, but I mean, I think just impeachment is A, it's kind of like a waste of energy, and B, I'd much prefer it when all of this. I mean, however annoying the resistance may be, I think it's very good to have their attention like focused as hard as humanly possible on this president, and the fact that so many people are paying attention to politics might very well go away kind of the moment that Trump rolls around. So, I mean, I don't, you mentioned the whole the specter of impeachment. I just think that could be a little bit too much. I think that, as you mentioned, the Democrats definitely need to focus on more things right now that are more important.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think this is my big worry and has been my big worry ever since the election, really, that one day Trump will be gone, and I'm worried that the Democrats and the media really will kind of, breathe a sigh of relief and lose some of the energy that there is right now around, organizing and opposing the Republicans, because, I mean, I think we know that, certain Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, made the big mistake of separating the Republican Party from Trump and saying, he's a bad Republican and not all Republicans are as bad as him. And, I think they're getting better at that, but it is vital not to let the rest of the Republican Party get away with with being how they are, because most of the worst stuff he's done has been Republican orthodoxy. Most of the worst stuff he's done has been stuff that any Republican president would have done. The tax bill, trying to repeal Obamacare, a lot of the immigration crackdown stuff, I don't think it would have been as sort of violently fascist as it has been under Trump, but it certainly would have looked something like it does now. And I think the focus on Trump can be kind of problematic when it distracts from the sort of broader, massive sort of systemic changes that need to happen.
Yeah, there's definitely a fear for me, and I think also for you, that like these kind of resistance women's march kind of marchers are just going to march right back to brunch. I don't know,
right.
But
right.
Yeah, and that would be the one big worry. And you also mentioned that Republicans, and I mean, I just don't get it. Why the people like, I don't know, just throwing out a name like Peter Dow seem to be like, so, or maybe not Peter, like people like CNN reporters, something like that. They seem to be like, the Republicans are not going to, they're not condemning. They need to condemn, or I just don't think. I think
right.
It's pretty pointless to wait for the Republicans' condemnation, and kind of in the broader sense, it doesn't really mean anything to like independent to their base or anything like that.
Right, of course, yeah. And I mean, obviously the bigger issue is not just will they condemn it, but will they actually do anything about it?
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a couple of Republicans who condemn Trump all the time, and like Jeff Flake and Ben Sass, and then they just vote with him almost all the time and support him on his biggest policy initiatives. So it's like, it doesn't really matter if you get up on the Senate floor and say this is an outrage, because if you support him on everything, it doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like the media saying, will this be the breaking point for Republicans? It's like, what world are you living in? Like, no. Like the only things he could do to get Republicans to break with him at this point would be like shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, like he said in the election, or propose increasing taxes on the rich, or propose single payer or something like that. Those are the things that would get the Republican Party to jump on the impeachment train. It's not going to be almost any kind of other, degradation of norms or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any like MAGA Susan or whatever on Twitter that would just be like, oh my gosh, Donald Trump was insulting to Paul Ryan. They're probably like really actually cheer it, because a lot of Trump supporters just kind of despise Paul Ryan, but just kind of on the basis of having a lot of money, he just seems to just to sneak by. But in the end, I think that with the whole Vladimir Putin thing, like, do you think a lot of Americans were sent more? Do you think this is kind of like the watershed moment that kind of like equivalent to like a Charlottesville or a major moment in the Trump presidency that some people are making it out to be? Or do you think a lot of Americans were just like, it's just words at the end?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think I have seen a couple of people compare this to Charlottesville. I mean, there are those people who are saying like this is our Pearl Harbor or whatever, which is just insane, obviously. I mean, not least because Pearl Harbor was our Pearl Harbor. It happened in the same country. But I mean, yeah, it's hard to say. Like, it's hard not to be cynical at this point and just be like, this is going to be forgotten in a week. You know, and like some new outrage will come out. You know, we'll have moved on. You know, in terms of like voters and whether voters care, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm sure America is so polarized now. You know, it's like most people are, you know, I mean, Republicans are not going to give a shit. Democrats are, you know, Democrats will care a lot. And then the people in the middle, I don't really know. Like the ones who lean Democrat will probably think it's pretty bad. The ones who lean Republican will probably think, you know, it's not ideal, but it won't really change their views. You know, I don't really see this being like some kind of paradigm shifting moment.
Yeah, I think it's just all kind of, it depends. Like Russia will be a factor, but far from the only factor, I think, weighing on people's minds.
Sure, yeah. I mean, people, you know, everyone knows, like, people vote their pocketbooks. Like, most of the time, most elections are not foreign policy elections. And when they are, it's for something a lot bigger, like, you know, thousands of dead soldiers in Iraq, or something like that. It's not, you know, sort of a breach of diplomatic norms or whatever. I mean, you know, people have people are saying this is treason. Maybe it is. I don't know. It's not really something I particularly care about. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be a ton of people whose minds are changed by this.
Yeah, I definitely do agree on that front. Now we are going to change directions a little bit from Trump news to a little bit more specific news, a little bit of a smaller scope, and focus more on labor, because I did see some tweets about this, even from you, about how BuzzFeed UK declined to unionize today, and I was just wondering, like, what is the significance of the current situation? Because I don't know, like, how many people have maybe been paying attention to like their particular drive to unionize, and like, I do know a lot of writers, a lot of journalists, they do have unions, and like, why would BuzzFeed vote no on this?
Yeah, I'm not, you know, I have to say I'm not 100% sure what the details are, because it was in the UK, and I know that they had been having a union drive, and there were a significant number of people who wanted to unionize, and then there were layoffs last year. So I know some people were speculating that what they did was basically lay off the people who wanted to unionize. I have no idea whether that is accurate. But it is true that, you know, according to BuzzFeed itself, a majority of staff in the UK had signed union cards calling for recognition with the UK's National Union of Journalists, which is, I guess, how it works in the UK. But with, you know, I do think that what this seems like is a case of union busting from BuzzFeed. You know, there had been reporting about this before, including from Molly Osberg at Splinter, about how the company had tried to dissuade people from voting for a union. I mean, we've seen that in the US office too. Jonah Peretti saying, you know, if you get a union, you won't get all the cool perks like, you know, like the Emoji sweaters or whatever that we give out, you know, stuff like that, free lunches and things. And it's honestly really disheartening coming from a unionized media organization. You know, I understand why that stuff works on people. I do get it, especially when it, you know, when you feel like you have a pretty good deal. It's hard to imagine why you would need a union, and when they cast it as something that's scary and might change things. Like, I totally get why people are reluctant, but the thing is, like, you don't know that you need sometimes you don't need a union until you really need one, and then it's too late, you know. Sometimes you don't need a union until your boss announces, by the way, we're laying off half the staff, or we're laying off a third of the staff, or and